Welcome to lesson 3.2 of the Partnership Lab called Scaling Partnerships. The goal of this lesson is to create a repeatable system for long-term partnership growth. It's important because without a structured scaling strategy, partnerships remain one-off wins instead of long-term growth drivers. So we're going to use the scaling framework to create a sustainable partnership growth map. So let's dive in. So why does scaling matters? Well, successful partnerships evolve over time. There is three phases that we have to keep in mind. The first one is the launch phase, where the partnership is in test phase as it goes through to achieve its first win. Then we move into optimizing. We improve workflows, we refine roles, and we set long-term goals. And then we move into scaling, which means expanding into new markets, new products, and new projects. Without scaling, partnerships can stagnate, they can lose momentum, and they can underperform. So as we're thinking about how we're going to partner with a new organization, it's always important to think about the long term while also balancing how we're going to achieve those early fast wins to build the credibility and momentum. So let's talk about a case study with Shopify. And most of us have purchased something from a Shopify store. They've come a long way in a short amount of time. But they did have a challenge, and that challenge was that they needed to expand their ecosystem without having to build everything in-house. The solution they went after was fourfold. They built an app store, which opened up a marketplace for third-party app developers to come in and build out interesting tools. They then introduced a partner program. We've talked about that. It enabled agencies to become a massive point of referral so they can build on top of Shopify. Then they had tech integrations. They partnered with Meta and Google and Amazon to make sure that all the things we come to know and love from those platforms were integrated directly into Shopify. And they created financial partnerships, which allowed for people to use the built-in Shopify payments and capital service instead of having to plug in third-party payment processors. So how did Shopify use the launch, optimize, and scale strategy for their partnerships? Well, let's start with phase one and the launch. Their first win was that they opened the Shopify App Store to test third-party developer interest, and the number of apps that came on the store quite quickly was somewhat spectacular. In phase two, they moved into optimizing, and they built the Shopify Partner Program for agencies to improve workflows and revenue sharing models so that more and more agencies could build their client stores on the Shopify platform. And then as far as scale was concerned, it was full expansion. This is where they partnered with Meta and Google and Amazon and fintech providers to integrate payments, ads, and logistics globally. What was the impact? There was 500 million paid annually to partners, and there was over $440 billion in merchant sales in 2023, and that has grown substantially to now in 2025. So the three pillars of scaling partnerships. We talk about launch and building a repeatable success. So what does that mean? Well, for our partnerships, we're talking about documenting what works in the early wins, creating playbooks and templates and workflows. So as we start to build out new partnerships, we have a playbook that has been established for the context of our business. And we also work to align teams on how to replicate those future kinds of deals. Then we move to optimizing, and this is where we look at process automations. We use CRM tools to track partnerships. We automate follow-ups and onboarding and reporting, and we implement standardized partnership agreements to speed up deal flow. This is what we'll get to as you move through and optimize for your larger partnerships. And then we think about scaling. We define the key performance indicators to measure partnership expansion. We scale by increasing investment and engagement with top-performing partners, and we move from a one-to-one partnerships model to a partnerships network, for example, referral programs and ecosystem. So when we're building a partnership growth map, what are the elements that we need to be thinking about? Well, let's start with number one, identifying high potential partners. Which partners contributed the most value in early wins? And where is the mutual growth with those partners? If they've done a great job early, it stands to reason that we want to try and make them more part of our future growth. Step two is defining scaling opportunities, and that is answering the question, what do we want to do in terms of scale? Do we want to expand our product service offerings together? Do we want to enter new markets or new industries? Or do we want to increase the financial or operational investment in the partnership to make it stronger? So defining scaling opportunities is important. Number 3, formalizing the growth agreements. Now, you might start with a partner in one geography. It's been very successful. But then we want to move from informal collaboration to structured long-term agreements. And that might mean that we're transitioning from an unincorporated agreement to more formal joint ventures. And that takes a step of thought to make sure we're making the right move. And step number 4 involves building partnership performance into the roles of your organization. So it's not just left to one partnership manager to manage all of this growth. It's actually built to every person's so they understand how their role contributes to the partnership growth roadmap. Now, with the 4 principles we've just talked about, the question is, how do we scale from 1 to 10 partnerships? Well, let's go back to basics. We're going to replicate what works. We're going to use our partnership blueprint to expand. So with those 4 principles in mind, how do we scale from 1 partnership to 10 partnerships? Well, let's start at the beginning. We replicate what works. We use our partnership blueprint to expand. And we've been building out that blueprint from the beginning of this program. Then we set out to attract more inbound partners because we've built credibility through success stories, and we also have a way for them to come to us by clicking on how we partner on our website. Then we move about creating a referral program, and this is all about encouraging partners to bring new partners towards us. And finally, we leverage strategic alliances, and we collaborate with larger partnership networks and industry leaders to do greater work together. Now, when you are scaling, there are a few things to watch out for. One of those is overextending. We need to make sure that as we scale from 1 partnership to 2 to 3, that we're scaling at a manageable pace. Because remember, there is a load that gets applied to your team when you add more partnerships. We also need to keep an eye out for weak alignment. So in using the ideal framework, it helps us to make sure that we're only expanding with high fit partners. And the final thing to look out for is process bottlenecks. We want to make sure that we automate as many of these processes as possible, in particular, the ability for new partners to reach out to us on our website so that we can assess, understand, and then build great partnerships with high alignment partners. So the key takeaways from lesson 3.2. Without a structured scaling strategy, partnerships remain one-off wins instead of long-term revenue drivers. Focus on attracting and retaining aligned high-value partners only. The ideal framework and the ideal partner scorecard will help you do just that. And then finally, attracting inbound partners, creating a referral network, and leveraging strategic alliances are key tactics to developing a partnership growth roadmap. Okay, the blueprint action steps for lesson 3.2 are to identify 10 high potential partners using the ideal scorecard. And once that's finished, we're going to move into lesson 3.3, how to wind up partnerships with dignity. You're doing a great job. Once you're finished with this lesson, hit complete, and I'll see you in the next one.